Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. Thank you for joining us. If you have a chance, head down into the show notes and click all the clicky-click links and maybe leave us a review. Check us out on social media as well as your YouTube channel where we're leaving reviews.
And if you have an opportunity, head on over to our website, check out our resources for curriculum and things. If you're looking for something new, we're working on getting some new curriculums in that we're going to review for our YouTube as well. Then we'll update there to the website. So we're trying to get some new things in. If there's something you really want to see a review on, definitely let us know and we'll try to get that on the website and contact those creators to get a copy of that curriculum.
Well, it's us going to the library at the Parent Partnership and we're just going to start stealing stuff.
Well, I mean, that's, step one.
Step one.
But we can also reach out to publishers and, grab things and take a look at them.
Absolutely.
We're through our crazy busy summer now and we're ready to be able to refocus.
No good, very busy summer.
Yeah, we're ready to refocus on, getting these reviews and stuff for you. So we're here to support you.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to talk about homeschooling and why it's awesome. We kind of looked at like all the things we had ever talked about and we were kind of missing the sales pitch. And we were like, we need to put this on, we need to lay down the rules of why we're doing this and why it's so good and why it's beneficial. And then if that's, you are kind of on the fence and you're thinking about homeschooling, or maybe you've been homeschooling for a little while and you need just to be revitalized and re-energized, we're going to be doing a two-parter because, we love two-parters.
We do.
And we're going to be talking today about the benefits to the children, to the learners. And then next week, we're going to be talking about the benefits to the parents because there's benefits to you as well as the educator. And we want to make sure that you are included in the benefits package that comes with homeschooling.
I mean, really, I think that homeschooling is such a whole family experience.
It really is.
And I kind of liken it to, when you have a new baby and everybody asks about the baby. How's the baby sleeping? How's the baby doing? Nobody asks how the mom is. Like, how is your postpartumness? How are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, no, Ariel, they always ask about the mother. They don't ever ask about the dad.
Yeah, no,
how's the dad handling?
They don't ask about the dad either. But I feel like this is kind of similar. We talk about homeschooling as a choice that we make for the benefit of our children and things, but it's also for the benefit of our families and sometimes the benefit for us, when we think about when we do the mind experiment of like, what if we didn't homeschool the kids? What if we made a different decision? What would we do? And I think of course we are struck with all the opportunities that our kids would not have if we weren't homeschooling. But I think what ultimately gets it for us is the impact to us and our family is like a big reason. It's right up there. It's like, our kids and their freedom to learn and for, all that stuff, all the flexibility and things we're going to talk about today. But then we also think about but our family and the flexibility we have and the bonds we have and all these things, it's like, it's the total package. So we don't want to leave out like one side because it's not just about the benefits for kids. It's the benefits for us as a family and us as parents.
Yeah. So if you have a set of friends or somebody that is going to be starting to homeschool, this episode and the following one may be a great episode to share amongst the newbies who are looking to get into it. So if you can go out there and spread the good word, and we will be much appreciative of that. So let's get into the first idea. Obviously, straight up, it's the student, it's the learner. The first thing that benefits them is kind of the great challenge that we all have, which is curriculum, finding something that is personalized, that's going to fit that learner, that kind of like personalized experience, not the one size fits all solution that we know doesn't work for them for whatever reason. Maybe we have an accelerated learner. Maybe we have someone who has special needs or has special challenges or whatever that might be. We want to get them a personalized experience. And that's kind of like the leading thing about homeschooling, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though, our children aren't special needs, and, our immediate friend circle is not, so none of these kids would be on an IEP or anything in a public school system.
No.
And yet, every single one of these kids we know learns a little bit differently, has different preferences. There are tricks and things that, not tricks, techniques, let's say, that their parents use to really personalize and make their learning experience the best that it can be for them. So even though these all would be kids in a regular classroom and they would, probably do okay, they probably would be fine, they all do have personalized learning needs. And if you listen to the podcast for a while, you will hear a lot about us and, finding the right ways to tackle reading with our oldest daughter and keep our youngest, who is running, engaged so that she's not, what's next? So every kid, they all have unique needs.
And I think any parent who has been homeschooling for a number of years, who has multiple children, will tell you right up front that it's amazing the differences just between your own children.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine what the difference is for all those other kids. Having 30 of those kids in a classroom, it's got to be so vastly different. What would be the most optimal way to educate? And that's kind of the thing that I always think about is adapting to the learner. And that adapting is kind of that perfecting the educational experience. Not that we're ever going to find perfection, and not that maybe perfection isn't the goal, obviously, but we can always adapt to a better situation or to find a better situation.
Right. And our kids are growing and they're changing, and what worked when they were 5 may not work when they're 7.
That's a great point. Like seeing seeing the changes just over a couple of years is like once you get locked in, and I know it sounds terrible, but once you get locked in, all of a sudden a curveball comes and you got to adapt to it.
Absolutely. And we have the ability to adapt. So our children benefit from our ability to personalize their experience, and then when it changes, we can pivot. Whereas like you say, a teacher with a classroom full of students, they've got to go with a playbook, and they can make some special accommodations here or there for different students, but they have a lot of kids that they have to care for and nurture. And we just have ours, so we can really be highly flexible and adaptable to what they need.
The next thing that we all hear is that homeschoolers have better academic performance across the board. I would
caveat this with saying there is not like a ton of amazing data. We are working on getting a statistics episode ready, but it's really hard to find great data, especially since there's lots of homeschoolers like us who do utilize some sort of a charter or parent partnership program. We technically aren't homeschoolers. We wouldn't be counted in all of those statistics.
Or the surveys. We wouldn't get tossed into the surveys.
We wouldn't get tossed in the surveys because we're not, going it completely alone, because our kids go to school for drama class, right? So the fact that our kids might score really well on a math exam, let's say later, a standardized test, is not going to get counted anywhere because our kids attend cooking at this school. So of course, that means we're ineligible.
And that's one of the things. We just had our orientation here for our parent partnership, and they were talking about the importance of taking the test at the end of the year and how that applies to the general score for the school, potentially funding and things of that nature. We are in their metrics. We're not in the homeschooling metrics for the most part.
So, anecdotally, colleges really like homeschool kids because they do perform well academically. They do tend to score really well on standardized tests. It's hard to pinpoint all the data on that, but in general, they do tend to score pretty well and do tend to have higher academic performance. Like I said, generalization, and I'm trying to find all the statistics so we can share them with you. A lot of them are from like the National Education Research Institute. So we're trying to find all of that. But in general, that's been the experience of all the teachers that we've spoken to at our parent partnership. And we've talked with other experts in the homeschooling field in our past interviews and things. And you'll hear them say, colleges really like homeschool students because they do tend to perform well.
They do. And part of that comes with the idea of deep focus on subjects. We have the ability to allow our learners not to run on a 50-minute class schedule.
Sure.
If our learners want to do something that they want to, for lack of a better way, to geek out on something, they can do it for 4, 5, 6 hours. They might go hard on something for weeks on end, where they would never have that opportunity in a public school because of the way the schedule is and the way they need to move from class to class. Goes back to that adaptability that we allow our children the freedom to delve into topics, cultivate that deep focus. And deep focus, I think, is the proper way to think about it, is allow them to say, you can master something, or you can, chase your interests, and you can, put everything you can into something. And having that experience, I think, helps you when you get a little bit older, especially when you get into those kind of college levels where you need to focus on something. They have those skills and they've had that experience. Sometimes we're not able to do deep focus because we just never do it. Because it's almost like a muscle that needs to be trained. Giving our children that opportunity in the homeschool space to have those experiences allows them to essentially attune their brain to that ability to know that they can do this type of thing, and they don't have to rush from one thing to the next.
We can also, on the academic performance note, we can also help our kids to have higher achievement by, being really connected, right? We're the ones giving them their tests. We're the ones who are looking at their writing. We're the ones that are giving them their practice PSATs and whatever, so we are very, very close with all of those, testing metrics and things. And we can see like, oh, you're having a problem with this area of whatever it is. And we can work on that with them and focus with them, which is a lot different than having a kid in a public school system who goes and takes a standardized test and you get the results back and it's like, oh, well, your child, scored in this percentile. You don't know why or how or what problems they missed. You don't know where to focus to help them to have better achievement. We can help work our kids through to get good SAT scores and things and help them to learn testing techniques and, all of those things. Well, and we have that ability to help elevate their academic performance.
Because we know homeschooling doesn't take as long as regular public schooling. We can then take some of that additional time and devote it to something that needs a little bit more focus. And a good example of that is knowing that our oldest has to take the state test this year.
Right. She's third grade.
And so I'm going through kind of a morning basket. I've gotten a couple test prep type of books, workbooks and stuff. And so we're practicing the art of taking a standardized test. And so my hope was I wasn't just going to toss her into the fire at third grade and say, good luck, have fun, if she's never seen this before. And so we are actually spending time. That's one of the funniest things when you take that SAT class in high school, if you can remember back to doing that. What was the biggest thing about that class? It wasn't the knowledge to learn per se. It was the, how do I take this thing?
Yeah.
How do I manage my time? How do I, just when we used to do it, it was the bubbles, right? Now they're doing it online.
I didn't even have an SAT test prep class. Your school did, but I didn't even have one.
Well, I took like an after school program, but it was taught by one of my teachers from my school, but it was like his own private thing. Yeah. It was like an 8-week crash course on, how the score, first of all, how does this test score? Like, you think you got to get everything right. You don't. And how do you manage your time? Do you get stuck on a certain thing? Move on, do this thing. And then it's the act of taking many, 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 many practice tests where you start to feel comfortable sitting down for, how long was the SAT? Like 3 or 4 hours or something? Because it was the two parts. It was the math and the reading and writing section. So it was such a long test. And if you had never taken anything like that, it was such a shock to the system. And so in this case, I have this extra time where I'm starting to prepare my daughter for the act of taking this test. And that's the level of freedom that we can do as homeschoolers that applies to not just standardized tests, but nearly anything. If it's athletics, if it's math and science, if you're a big math and science family, if it's a history thing or an art, if you're an art family, you have this ability to spend the time necessary to cultivate this through the deep focus, through the additional academics that you can do. So I think it's kind of the whole well-rounded thing. Now, moving into social emotional learning, and I think one of the biggest pieces of the pie, of the reason pie, like if you look at if you look at all the reasons people are homeschooling these days, I think this one is becoming more and more important.
Yeah,
And I think
believe so too.
it's the safety of being at home as opposed to being in the schools. And we're not just talking about violence or any type of that type of thing,
Yeah.
but
There's
the everyday violence, the bullying,
bullying.
and all those types of things.
Yeah.
And we hear the horror stories on our local Facebook groups in our town. We hear these parents just like talking about like the life of living in these schools. It can be very challenging. Now, does that apply to all kids? Of course not.
No.
But there's a certain number of children are experiencing this on a daily basis. And then obviously there's the horror stories we sometimes see that crop up. We don't want to be part of those either. And so I think homeschooling for safety is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of the pie for a lot of families.
I know that there's been a number of families who've said to me that safety is a big priority for them,
Yeah.
Especially families who may have lost a parent, earlier.
Yeah.
They have some certain, specific concerns, and they're really worried about safety, right? They want to keep their kids close, and I think that's, everyone's
It's a laudable goal.
decision. Yeah, it's everyone's decision about, level of risk and how they feel and what they're comfortable with, and there's also the security of being there for our kids. I think it's a really, not just a physically safe space to learn at home, but it is a emotionally safe space, right? Our kids can be silly. I think our 8-year-old I feel like kids are growing up so quickly. Maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess every generation probably says this. Kids grow up so quickly these days. But I do feel like, we're looking out and there's lots of, kids we've seen at, second grade, and they've all got their cell phones and stuff. And I just feel like, wow, it feels like they're growing up a lot faster.
The idea of extending that innocence a little bit longer and the youth and the playfulness and the childhood is something that I'm excited about. Allowing them, yes, of course I want them to be high functioning adults and all that type of stuff. But she's 8 and I just want her to have fun.
I mean, it's
at least for a couple more years.
It's funny because when we invite friends over that are other homeschool friends, the kids, I mean, they're still playing dress up. And they're making up plays, and they're just doing imaginative and silly things, and I think that's great. And they have this space when they're learning with us to make mistakes and not feel like they have to be embarrassed or worried about what their peers are going to think. Right? They can be free to make those mistakes and know like this is a safe place. We're not going to laugh at you.
Well, we know our oldest had she was kind of last year in her parent partnership. She was elevated in a couple of her classes. Because of skill, because of her dancing was better and everything. But she was unfortunately in a class full of 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th graders.
Yeah,
and
it was a little weird.
It was a little strange.
A little crazy.
She physically,
she's very tall.
Very tall. But she looked like one of those kids. She wasn't the shortest kid in the class, but she had some apprehension around her reading that really affected her mental state when she was there. She was constantly aware of her insecurities, and we don't. And I could imagine if she was in like a second grade class, uncertain about her reading, that she might clam up, knowing that there's 25 different sets of eyeballs staring at her when she's reading a sentence or something like that, and then the fear that, oh, I've made a mistake, they're going to make fun of me or whatnot. I've seen her put those types of pressures on herself, and I'm happy she doesn't have to experience that on a daily basis, that she can have that space to grow. And now she's reading great. She's reading chapter books and everything.
She's doing really well.
We've come through it. Maybe we'll do an update video on it. But
let's temper it a little bit. We're getting there. It's definitely way better.
You could tell how excited I am after 4 years.
Yeah, she's doing great.
She's doing great.
But it's true.
Those type of fears are
You have your
real.
insecurities.
Yeah.
She was really upset about going to Girl Scout camp this summer because she was afraid that they were going to ask everyone to write letters home and that she wasn't going to be able to write a letter home. And she was really upset about that. And I said, do you really want to write a letter home? She goes, no, I just don't want anyone to know that I don't feel comfortable writing. Yeah. And so it was like, she immediately, it's like, how do my peers see me? And so this is a safe space to be silly, to work at the level that you're at and not be ashamed of where you're at or any of that. So I love that part of it. The next really important piece for me is the bond that we have with our kids. this is, and you talked about the pie chart. For us, this is a really big chunk of that, of our reasons for homeschooling is, we waited until we were in our early 30s to start having children. We really kind of built our lives together because we've been together since we were 21. And we really wanted just, to be like ready. And then we had these children. And we just really want to enjoy them and, bond with them and love them and be close with them. We didn't want to have to send them to school all day. And I totally don't have any judgment at all for anybody that sends their kids to school all day. That's totally great. If that works for your family, and that's awesome. It just wasn't going to work for our family. And I know that we have a stronger bond with our kids because we homeschool them.
Yeah, but also there's that stability too, where we can create that, as you said, that kind of that safer space for them to know there's not going to be these ups and downs, sort of those fears and anxieties, and allows them to generate their own confidence and their own, the confidence. I think it's the confidence to
Right.
be who they need to be in those spaces and be confident that they can act in a manner without any of those uncertainties or insecurities to hold them back.
We can give them this social emotional tool belt, right? Because we're not with them constantly. They do have these other activities that they're doing, and we're not like right up in everything, right? We do give them, their space with.
We're not a full free range family, but we're about halfway there.
we try to give them safe, reasonable opportunities to be on their own. In controlled spaces where we know they're safe, but they can feel like they're kind of independent. But the point is that, like, my family trends very heavily towards anxiety. And if you've listened to this podcast for a while, I've struggled intensely with anxiety in the past. And I still do. I mean, I always will, right? It'll always be a part of me. But I can see those, the beginnings of those roots in our older daughter. And just the way she approaches things. And I am so happy that I'm so close with her and that we're involved in enough of what she's doing and we're knowledgeable about everything that's going on that I can give her those tools now at 8 years old. I started noticing the seeds of that when she was 6.
Well, it took you a long time through various channels to learn those tools.
Oh my gosh.
But you had to do it as an adult. Now you're giving her the opportunities to learn those tools to handle anxiety and fear, as a child, and that she can then utilize those to help her through difficult situations.
Yeah, I can synthesize 10 years of therapy and 3 different therapists and put this into her. So when she encounters something that's difficult, I can say okay, well, let's talk about why you're afraid of this, or what we could do, or what are strategies and things.
Or
and
look at your previous successes and then use those as a springboard moving forward. Yeah.
So if we weren't this close, I could absolutely see her, having a lot of stress and anxiety in a public or even a private school setting where I'm not as close to the situation and I don't know. And she's the kind too that'll clam up and won't talk about something. Yeah. So you really have to be very tuned into her to know, hey, something's not right here with her. So that whole social and emotional well-being is really important to us and a big part of why we homeschool.
Another element that you as homeschoolers can look forward to when you choose homeschooling is the development of lifelong learning skills. I think this is great. For me, the encouragement of independence has always been a big thing for me. Seeing, friends in high school and college lose the thread because whether they were in such a walled up environment that when finally the walls came down, that there was kind of a loss of control.
Yeah.
I even kind of stumbled a little bit into that as well, my first year or so of college, and I was able to right the ship. But developing that confidence, that independence is really what we're looking for when we, still starting to think about the nightmare of okay, in 10 years, she's going off and she's going to wake up every day and got to go to class or got to go to a job, got to pay the bills and everything's oh my gosh, it gives me anxiety thinking about her having to manage that. But I was able to do it for the most part, and you were able to do it as well. But I want her to get that confidence. But I also know the mistakes I made at that age, and the mistakes that my friends made that were just catastrophic. And I don't want her to have that error, and I want her to have more independence now. And that's kind of, I think, one of the big benefits of homeschooling is, being able to cultivate that independence, that
Right.
confidence to be able to make and do the right things.
It's that self-discipline and the ability to learn how to manage their time. Going from you have a couple of cousins, and they just were fantastic in school. I mean,
Yep.
really great, but they were busy constantly because they were in school, and then they had lots of activities, and they did lots of extra stuff, and it was just like their whole life was planned. And then they got into college and were like, I don't know what to do, because it was like everything had been managed for them, and kids are so busy these days that's one of the things that I love, is that we can, purposely pick these times, and as our kids get older, we give them more and more bits of responsibility. We had a good episode on fostering personal responsibility a couple months ago that you can link in the show notes. But we can slowly build this with them to build their own self-discipline and be sure they can manage their time and they can organize what they're going to do, and they don't procrastinate at all. And we can give them those like life skills that they wouldn't necessarily get the opportunity to learn in a different environment.
Another one too is thinking critically. I think it's
Yeah.
become more important these days to
Sure.
not only understand where information is coming from, but taking information and synthesizing your understanding and being able to find, the truth, at the kernel of that piece of information.
Making your own
Yeah.
decisions and forming your own opinions.
For a lot of us, we are kind of, avalanche of data and information and content and whatnot. And it's just, sometimes it can feel so dizzying, and we can imagine what life is going to be like, if we can look forward and through the magic glass to see what the world's going to look like in 10 years when AI has taken root and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And maybe we all have robots in our home by then. And
Ooh, it's going to be the Jetsons.
yeah, it's going,
We have to name her Rosie if we get a robot. I'm just saying.
100% we'll name it Rosie.
Okay, fair
Yep.
enough.
Yep.
Marriage deal.
Yep, marriage deal. Yes, when we've leased our AI bot. But what is life going to be like for them? What is school going to be like? What is the job market going to look like? There's a lot of uncertainty there, and on top of that, a level of sophistication to handle that type of digital world is it's staggering. I mean, it's staggering to just think about it from an adult standpoint, but to think about a kid coming into it is amazing. But those critical skills, being able to understand and reason and think and know what is true, or reason to the truth in some respect.
Yeah, tracing sources. It's getting more difficult as the years go on to know the origins of different things that you hear and read.
Yep.
And there's so many different people kind of vying for your attention, and they all have different purposes in that. And it's just, it's a really tough thing. So I think you're absolutely right. And the other thing that I think is really important about this part of this lifelong learning skills is really fostering a love of being a lifetime learner. I remember that we had this conversation years and years ago, that we both loved to read until we
Until high
didn't,
school, yeah.
until school gave us these books that we hated, that they forced us to read. And all our time was spent reading books that we just despised. And then it absolutely killed our love of reading for both of us until we got out of college. We both had to rediscover as adults what it was like to love reading, because we had to read books that were totally not what we wanted to read. And I don't want to, and that's like an example of one subject, but I don't want to squash our kids' love of learning in any way. No. If there's something that is just not, it's not up their alley, if they need to know it, it's because it's important for life or for college, we'll teach it as quickly and efficiently as we can, and then we'll move on and get them to something that is more, their speed, and helping them to connect to things that they maybe don't want to learn to, like, how is this going to be used later? Why is this important to know? So that they can really enjoy the process of learning, because we love to learn. And that's on the pie chart. If we go back to Matt and Ariel's pie chart, this is also a big part of our reasoning, is that we love learning, and we love getting to do this with them. And so we want to cultivate that love in them too. We don't want, a poor experience or some curriculum or something to squash their natural human curiosity and love of learning.
Well, I mean, I'm probably a good example of that. It's, how many times did I fall asleep in history class in high school? I mean, I had a couple of good history teachers, but they're like, it's kind of sleepy, right? And I'm crushing history books left and right
Oh
now.
my
It's
gosh,
like,
you read so much nonfiction history books and you retain it, which I think is pretty amazing because I could read it and it would like go in one ear and out the other, but you retain it.
It's funny, like once you get to this age and you're an adult and you can pay for the things you want to do, all of a sudden you all have hobbies, we have interests, we watch this on YouTube, we learn how to do this. I was showing you, building my own watch off of Alibaba things today.
I don't even know where you came up with
I know.
this.
And so like all of a sudden you get all these interests, right? Like I just read Ron Chernow's Grant, and it, like you put that doorstop book in front of me 20 years ago, I would just laugh at you.
Yeah.
But like I crushed it.
I
Super
feel like
fast.
this is the middle-aged man.
Yeah.
You've developed a love of history and grilling.
There's
So
there's a famous comedian who said that once you hit 40, everyone gets into World War II. All men get into World War II and in history books.
grilling.
Grilling. I think I've done that. Yeah.
But it's true, right? There's subjects that we naturally gravitate towards, and we can really encourage and enjoy those. My older daughter loves musical theater, child after my own heart, and so we've been studying musical theater, and we've been watching shows, and I'm taking her to shows, and we're learning about structure of the plays and just all that stuff, right? Because she really enjoys
She's
it.
about to take her first theater class.
Yeah, so let's dive into it and make sure that, for our kids, learning is the best experience we can make it. They're not saying that they're going to love every subject, but
They don't have to.
they don't have to, but we can do everything that we can to not squash that natural love of learning.
And one of the best ways to do that is to embrace the flexibility in the education. I think with homeschooling,
In the pie chart.
chart.
This is another big piece of Matt and Ariel's pie.
it kind of goes back to that adaptability, but I think the flexibility is even more interesting in the fact that you don't have to do everything every single day the same way that they do it in the schools. It's not school at home. This is homeschooling, home education, probably a better way to put it. And we can have the flexibility in our schedule to work around our interests, our hobbies. We realize we don't need to, we don't have to do home education for 8 hours a day. And when you start to think about, I got all my homeschooling done in 2 hours. Well, what do we do for the rest of the day? Well, and that's
anything we want.
Anything you want, Pinky. We can do anything you want. And, like those are the types of, it gives you that flexibility to do these amazing things.
I remember when we were dating and we decided that we were going to homeschool.
When I was wooing you.
Yeah.
We went on walkabouts. And
yeah, we moved into our first house, and we were talking about our future and the children we were going to have someday. And, what were we going to do? And immediately we both were like, we're going to homeschool them.
Yeah, I think
this is how long we've been talking about this.
Yeah, we've talked for a long time.
For 20 years we've been talking about this. And our reason at that time didn't have anything to do with the quality of education we could provide them or, most of these other things that we've been talking about. It was all about, we had just gotten out of college and we felt like our entire lives had been so structured, right? That, we had been kind of owned from kindergarten through 12th grade. And then we both went to college in 4 years and we put that all in. And we finally got this freedom of being able to say, we're masters of our own schedule. I'm sure we had jobs and we only had so much vacation time. But if we didn't like that job or like those benefits, then we, maybe we would look for something else, or we would make a lifestyle change or whatever. We finally, for the first time in 17 years, we were in control.
Yep.
And we had that freedom to be flexible. And the thought of having children and having somebody else tell us what our schedule had to be was abhorrent. We just couldn't. We couldn't say that after all that time, somebody else was going to dictate when we could have a day off.
Yeah, or when we could go on vacation, or how long we could go on vacation.
Right, that somebody else could say that.
I mean, obviously our work makes those decisions, and yes, we have to go to work and everything, but like from the standpoint of, oh, no, we can't do that, we have homework tonight. Or no, we can't go on that 2-week vacation because that's too much time off from school, and how will we make up the time, right?
Right. I mean, I remember my parents having to call in and lie that I was sick so we could go on a ski trip.
Truancy, Ariel. And statute of limitations are not up on that.
There's all of these, the idea that somebody would tell us what we could do with our own kids, we couldn't imagine doing that. So the flexibility of being able to say, you know what? Next Friday, as long as my work's good with it, we're off. Yeah. We're doing something. We're going to take our kids and have this amazing experience. Or, our kids need a day. for whatever reason, and we're going to take that day
Yep.
and give that to them. So, maybe mom has to go to work, but you can give that to them. So that flexibility to make our own schedule, to make it what we need it to be, to learn to do schooling when our kids need it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big piece to say, hey, if your kids are better in the afternoon, sure. You could homeschool in the afternoon. Yeah. You've got a parent who works swing shift. And so, you've got this shifted schedule, then homeschool in the evening.
Or
right?
They're on deployment. Or we have a friend whose husband goes and fishes in the Bering Sea. And I mean, when he's home, I don't want to be shipping my kids off to the school. I mean, you're only going to see them for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, right? Why? I'm going to lose them for 8 hours a day and I only get to for a couple hours and then I'm gone again. It's like, or you're on deployment to the military. It's like, why do you want to miss this opportunity to be with the kids? If you have more of those kind of like a wilder schedule than, the 9 to 5 type of thing.
We know we have friends that are nurses and firefighters, and they don't have typical schedules. And when they're off,
they want to be with their kids,
be with their families, and their kids want to be with them too. And it creates a real struggle with trying to have to send them to school, because it's like, well, school says we have to go. We don't have options to do what we feel is right for our family.
Yep. Moving on to kind of with pivoting from that flexibility, and another idea here is the real life learning, being able to go and see things and do things. And now I'm not saying that schools don't take kids on field trips, they do and whatnot, but you have way more opportunity to go to the museums, way more opportunity to go and visit that town that has that cultural center, way more opportunities to go and see the parade, the cultural parade that is happening on Wednesday, or go to the farmer's market, or, go and experience the world with your children. That is not just Saturday, Sunday, or the evenings. And a lot of great learning can happen there. And I think that's a big miss. And that's a big advantage, I think, in homeschooling, is that you have that, you have all this extra time. And like today I did homeschooling. I ran a bunch of errands. We went to the $2 movie at the movie theater. We came home. We cleaned, we did a little yard work together. So like just all those, just experiencing the world, and then doing volleyball practice, and, just having a blast, super full day, I think is vastly better than the experience of just going to school and sitting there for 7-8 hours. Yeah.
I mean, and our kids get to have these experiences that they might not have otherwise had. Yeah. Our kids have been with us to doctor's appointments.
They're going to my dentist appointment in a couple of weeks.
Right.
I mean, it's just the thing. It's just what happens.
Our kids go with us to the DMV and they learn, right? There's just a lot of opportunities that they have. And, we find that life is learning. So, we can take advantage of going to, like you say, a festival, or if you've been listening to us for a while, we go on these big trips every year, and we took our kids to Ireland for a month, and I did some work while we were there, and they immersed themselves in that culture, and they learned so much. They would never have that opportunity if we were in school. There's just, you have the opportunity to be spontaneous. Yep. You have the opportunity to get out in the real world and let your kids experience something that they might not otherwise, which I think is this real world part is really important, especially when it comes to figuring out what they want to do for their career.
100%.
Right? Because kids are super busy in school and they're thinking, well, what do I want? Do I want to be a doctor? Okay. Then they get somewhere in the middle of school and maybe they decide that, I actually don't really want to do that. I don't like that. Yeah. We have a friend whose daughter's a Girl Scout, and she really wanted to be a vet. Like, this girl was just all about wanting to be a vet. So they went into 4-H, and they got her an internship at a local vet's office, and she did it for 6 months, and she's like, I don't want to be a vet.
And she was able to do that
and she's 14. And so great. Now she knows that wasn't the right path for her before spending all this money and getting into college and all these things, because she got to have that real world experience. She wasn't going to school, so she could go and intern at a vet's office.
But just
in the middle of the day.
Having that experience, not only to help her make the right decision in her career, but also she will carry that experience forward. I mean, it's job experience, it's work experience, the knowledge of working with other people in a professional environment.
Sure.
All of that plays in. And then when she finally figures out what she wants to do, all that stuff's on her resume. She has references that can go forward. We're thinking about this now, okay, we're trying to project out, 5-6 years when our daughter's, maybe going to start doing an internship or, having a job. What type of job do you want to do? lifeguard versus, working at McDonald's or anything. I mean, where do you want to work and what do you want to do and what experiences do you want to get from that? And how do those experiences help, propel you into your career?
How can we give her a variety of experiences? Like, we found out a friend of ours their son was a camp counselor this summer. Like, oh, wow, that was a great experience. You would learn a lot about leadership, about working with people, and our daughter's kind of toyed with whether she wants to be a teacher or not. It's like, well, that would certainly give you some experience of knowing if you like working with kids and, you're interested in that. So the ability to give them that real world touch, to connect the learning that we're doing to the real world, it's invaluable.
Yeah. And then kind of like a little bit of a dovetail to that is the real world, but also the real world in terms of seasonal. Like there's so many seasonal learning, so much seasonal learning that happens.
Totally true.
If you're in a certain part of the country that maybe has, really big winters, maybe skiing or alpine things, or, there may be warm, hot summers for you that maybe have certain experiences, or maybe you have big rivers that flow during the spring or whatever. And there's so many experiences that you might not get because you're, locked away into this, the building for most of the day. You have the experience to do these activities during the week and you can do more of them. And I think that's the big thing is it's not just like, they can do it one day a week, but what if you were able to do 2 or 3 of these events a week, or, whatever that might be. Engaging in the seasons, I think it's kind of a little wrinkle there that I think we don't really think about as much.
Yeah, we're engaging in this round the world, globe trekking or whatever. And I was actually having conversations today at work because I have a friend at work who's from India, and I'm asking her about Diwali celebrations and when there's going to be different events happening because we want to take our kids to one. And I have another friend at work who is Mexican. And I'm saying, hey, we really want to do something for Dia de los Muertos. Can you help me find a great family-friendly cultural event? Because I know these are people that are very connected to their local cultural groups here. They're very active. And it was great because we can say like, what we're going to be studying is we're going to study Mexico for 2 weeks right around the Day of the Dead. And we're going to go to this festival and we're going to enjoy that. We can just do that because our schedule is our own. We have the freedom to teach what we want and to teach it when we want to. That is just so amazing.
So pivoting off of the flexibility, kind of goes into this thing that we kind of a little bit hit on earlier, which was kind of cultivating those interests and those passions. And I think one of those big things is focusing on the strengths of your learners. It's one of the things when you're one-on-one and you're able to engage with them, you get to know their interests and their desires to learn, like, where would they want to do, what type of jobs are they interested in? You can then watch how good they are in certain areas. Maybe they're really good at math and they want to be, they love games and software and all that stuff. Maybe they want to be a software developer, and you can start to hone those skills and those strengths, and you're able to guide your learners in those directions and give them additional resources, give them additional time to do the deep diving, to really cultivate those strengths so that when they do get to that level of having to make a decision on what they want to do, I've been doing software development for 4 years now,
right?
And here's a portfolio of things I've made.
I've had the time to pursue my passions. It's funny, we really do ask kids to graduate high school and have all the answers about what they're going to do.
It's so hard.
And I feel like for both of us, we just made decisions kind of capriciously is not really the right word exactly, but I didn't really know that that's what I wanted to do. I was like, okay, engineering. I don't know.
That sounds good.
In my head, engineering was similar. This is 17-year-old me. Engineering was similar to architecture, and Mike Brady was an architect, and Mike Brady had a nice house and a housekeeper. And so I thought,
You had a lot of kids too.
I interviewed an architect when I was 16, and he was a super boring guy, even though architecture is not super boring. But at the time, I was like, ooh, that sounds like a boring profession. But I was like, hey, engineering's close, and I could have a nice house like Mike Brady and not have to move a lot like we did because my dad was in construction. That was the extent of it. I didn't know that I was going to be a good engineer. And in fact, I wasn't a very good engineer, right? I mean, I'm a fine engineer, but I'm a much better, people leader and manager than I am an engineer. I just happened to luck into something that was a decent thing to do. It's not like a lot of thought and skill planning and things went into it. With our kids, we have this ability, as you say, to really, look at their interests and look at their aptitudes and help them to come up in areas where they might be struggling towards their goals, or to help build on the strengths that they already have, help them explore what they might want to do and learn, and really be much better informed, right? About, what's ahead and the decisions that they make. I feel like we have this ultimate ability to coach them so much better than we were ever coached, because we know them so well, and we can really help guide them and nurture them, not just in the emotional side but in their whole academic and life skills areas.
Absolutely. And that kind of dovetails with the idea of the hobbies and the extracurriculars. And I think a lot of times those hobbies and extracurriculars kind of feed into the interests. And if your child has a thread of entrepreneurship,
right,
this is this is a great opportunity for them to kind of find those things.
Sure.
And to kind of hone those skills. We have kids who cake pop sellers, and we have
we got a kid who has saved thousands of dollars up by selling at farmers markets for the last few summers, and he's very diligent, and he is very entrepreneurial, and his parents can support that time.
Like, you have this vision, like, it's totally possible that there's this kid who loves fishing and they're into 3D printing, and they end up like making some fishing part that all of a sudden is like this business. Like, you could see it happening.
Right.
He's a homeschooler. He's a homeschooler, 20 years old, and runs his own little, business or something like that, because he has these interests and he had this opportunity and he had the time to do the research and to devote themselves to whatever that thing might be. I was online listening to some stay-at-home dads talking about hobbies, and this one guy talked about how he had started a YouTube channel during the pandemic because he was really into leatherworking, right? And it became this thing. Like, it was like people wanted him to buy his wallets and his leatherwork and stuff like that. And they were talking about, like, some side hustles and business, what do you do as a stay-at-home dad to make a little bit extra money and stuff. But he was talking about this thing, and I'm thinking inside of my head, I'm like, you could totally see that, like a teenage kid getting this passion of whatever it might be. And really that cultivates into almost like a business. And entrepreneurship is definitely something that we can't negate when we're thinking about, where their career paths are.
Well, we need entrepreneurs, I mean, to have new ideas and start new businesses. And I think it's great. And the other thing about their hobbies and interests is we so often hear from friends who do have kids in public school that at some point, they're like, oh, so-and-so, loved dance, but we just couldn't keep up with it. She's so busy in school. She's got so much homework. I remember when I was in La Leche League, and when I was just had my first baby, and I remember a mom saying in there, she was asking the other moms, because she had an older son and a baby, and she was like, does anybody know of a baseball league that only practices on the weekends? Does anybody have any resources? Because my son's in second grade and he has so much homework that he wants to play baseball desperately, but he can't. We have to do it only on the weekends because he's so busy every night, right? And there's so many kids out there who have different passions, and they do have to give them up at some point because they just physically can't juggle that and be at school for 8 hours. And then the couple of hours of homework that they're going to have. And there's especially a big drop off as you get into junior high and high school.
Yeah.
Our homeschool troop is multi-age, and it goes all the way through to, I think right now the oldest kid is going to be a freshman in high school. So, but a lot of Girl Scout troops, man, they die off, right? You get into junior high and those kids get so busy, the girls cannot continue. Yeah. They can't work on their higher level service awards and mentoring younger girls and all of the things because they're just...
They got sports, they got homework,
they're way, way too busy.
Social circles have grown.
There's just too much to do. And so we can make that decision. And in fact, we can actually help let our kids make that decision. They can benefit from saying, where does your passions lie? What decisions do you want to make? Where do you want to say, well, okay, I'm going to give this up and I'm going to move more into this because this is where I'm at. And how can we support you with our homeschool schedule so that you can still pursue the things that you love?
Yeah, exactly. I think moving on from, interests and passions, I think one of the big bugaboos for homeschooling is the socialization.
It's the first one people want to
Yeah.
rail against, that they're never going to get socialized. But this is actually a benefit, not never getting socialized, but the socialization opportunities is actually a huge benefit for our students.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think it's the perfect thing. Socialization isn't the problem. It's the amount of opportunities are so vast. You have to make choices on what socialization you have. Like, I know people are
our kids will socialize with everybody.
They'll socialize with that and whoever you want. Yeah, that's the problem. Is we gotta figure out what are the best avenues for them on those things. And I know there are some concerns where it's like, oh, you're home all day and you're not going out and the kids aren't seeing kids. I don't see that as a problem. I think it's easier. Maybe it might be more of a challenge if you're in more of a constrained environment, maybe a rural setting or something like that.
Right.
But if you're in the suburbs or near the suburbs or even in the city, it would be hard to not get the socialization just by osmosis in a lot of respects.
By being a human in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, today, you're talking about this today. I mean, obviously, we have the parent partnership, which is great for us. But you didn't have parent partnership today. School hasn't started yet.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, today you ran errands. The kids helped you. They went and picked up prints at the UPS store.
Yeah.
You guys went to the library. They interacted with the librarian. You had to go and buy camping gear at the store.
Well,
and they helped pick that up and they helped check out.
And it's all that independence that I'm starting to have them
Yeah.
do those things. And soon I will be giving them the cash and they will go and buy the things they need to buy. And
they go and interact with the people at the movie theater. They request their popcorn and they do all these things, right? And it's like, and when they do interact with other kids, they interact with a much wider age group, which is really great. One of the things that's really heartening to see when we do see kids playing on the playground under parent partnership, it's like all ages of kids. You'll have a game of like touch football or something happening.
Tag or...
You've got kids there that are like junior high down to like, well, one time our preschooler went and joined in last year and they were like, fine. Everybody was accepted and it was all fine for everybody to participate. It wasn't like, oh, no, we only hang out with fourth graders. That's all, you know.
And then it goes the other way. You start seeing, our oldest, who's now in third grade, turning around and being accommodating to 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds.
Absolutely.
And, essentially taking that same experience and reversing it and being that older child and welcoming children in. And, the socialization goes in both directions once they get old enough that, those older kids need to learn how to treat other people who are younger and be more patient with them and whatnot. And those are additional socialization skills that I think are lost. We're always trying to think about, like, what do they do with their peer group and how do they respect authority is what I think most people think about when you're thinking about socialization. It's like, how do you respect your teachers and principals and administrators and then your peers? And those peers tend to be people, your age plus or minus 1 year. That's the definition of socialization. Or when you get into a more elevated scenario, you're talking about kids who are plus or minus 2 years. So like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior in high school and things of that nature, or middle school where you're either the lowest person on the totem pole, middle, or above that, and then elementary kind of be this giant amalgamation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that strata that you can see in a homeschool community where you may see a 14-year-old playing with a bunch of 7-year-olds, right? And that's a level of socialization that is also important as, a 14-year-old going out and having to interact with a bunch of 30-year-olds at a store or something like that. I think I think it goes in both directions.
I mean, as an adult in the world, you're never going to be in a situation usually where it's just you and everyone who, just your age, right? Like,
especially when you get into you get into a business and whatnot. I mean, you could be working with somebody and you have to show respect, and then you also have to demand respect back.
Right. I mean, I'm leading
to somebody
a team
who's 30 years older than you.
I have engineers on my team that are in their mid-60s, right? They're getting ready to retire, but I'm the leader of that team. And I also have to mentor folks that are like 24. And I have to help those two groups bridge, right? They're different genders, potentially, different life experiences. They're in different fields. I've got to help. How do we get, how do I bridge that gap? That's a really difficult thing to do. And I think the more we expose our kids to being able to not only be with different age groups, but also different types of people, there are lots of varied folks in the homeschool community. And I think because homeschooling, it's, there's a bunch of people in different reason pie chart, but there are a percentage of people that are homeschooling because public school is not the right fit for their child. Their child has some sort of special needs. Yep. They would have been on an IEP and it wasn't working. And it's amazing for our kids to get to interact with this wide variety of people who have different life experiences, who, may have different special needs and considerations that they need to make, coming from, diverse backgrounds that are different than them. And it's awesome. It's
Amazing.
Awesome that they get so many varied experiences. And also, we get the opportunity to make sure that the relationships that they are building are healthy relationships. Mm-hmm. If our kids were at school and they were just making friends with, whichever kids in their class, we wouldn't have any ability to see if any of those relationships weren't healthy ones, right?
Well, and interacting with those relationships can be very complex, and you're almost asking someone to ride a bike before they've taken off the training wheels.
Yeah.
And a lot of those social cues and the social things that they may experience in those certain situations may be above where you want them to be. Like, you don't want them experiencing those types of, conversations, that type of talk, that type of behavior and that type of stuff. Maybe you don't want that. And maybe that's not necessarily a good thing or something that they need to be learning about now. Maybe it's fine in a couple of years to learn about those nuances, but maybe not right now.
Yeah. And you think back to your own childhood, and I remember my own childhood several times where I was very young and talked with somebody who had a much older brother or sister and learned all kinds of things that was probably I was too young to really comprehend and deal with, right?
I distinctly remember being a second grader or third grader on the playground, and one of us turning to each other and going, "Should we be saying all these bad words as many times as we're saying?"
Right. Oh, I remember that.
I'm like, I'm thinking right now, I'm like, that's my child's age. No, I would not want her hearing
no,
those.
I shouldn't say. I remember the words that I used to say at that age. Yeah. And we
were rough kids, Ariel.
Oh yeah. We can also make sure that our kids aren't like forming a clique, that they aren't becoming a bully.
Thank you.
This is a big one. And when we're
setting the norms, what is normal, what are the norms of society? We don't want bullying. We don't want our children to be bullied, the safety thing, but we also don't want our kids to be gullible enough to be pulled into that type of environment.
We don't want them to be excluded or to exclude others, right? We don't, and with enough parents around, we can help kind of coach them and set good examples for them. And, we were on
quality versus quantity type of thing.
Yeah. When we were on vacation, our daughter wanted to play with this other little girl at the pool.
Oh yeah.
And they kind of made friends. We encouraged her, go play, this would be great. And then we observed the behavior as that girl convinced our daughter to exclude her younger sister and to play tricks on her. And we were seeing this happen, and because we're so close and we're able to intervene. And of course, you're on vacation, you can do that. You're right there. We as homeschool parents, we get this opportunity all the time. Yeah. When I'm with the girls at Scouts, when you're with them, when they're with their friends or they're at the parent partnership, we're seeing their interactions with their peers, and we're there to, not tell them exactly what they should do all the time, but kind of give course correction. And there have been plenty of times even where we have like a kind of a child swap where we take different kids, the other kids to school, and then some days our parents take our kids, and we trade off, and which works great. But there have been days where you've taken those kids to school and you've seen behavior on another kid, and you're like, hey, no, that is not okay to do. We don't do that. I know your parents wouldn't approve of you doing that. It's like, okay, great. We're there as a community to be like that. I know that was inappropriate. We've heard our girls easily fall into, bullying behaviors because they're watching other kids do that. And they're, we were picking them up from day camp, right? Girl Scout day camp. And they were making fun of another girl that was at the camp. And you're like, hey, girls,
that's not cool.
That's not cool. We don't do that. That's not something we're supposed to do. It's like they need those bits of corrections.
Learning social skills is no different than any other thing that you're learning. Reading, math, science, history.
It's so important.
It's so important, and it's such a complex thing because there's all these subtle cues. It's how you say, like a lot of times when the girls are like kind of arguing, yelling at each other, the tone is so aggressive.
Right.
And I'm constantly checking in saying, check your tone, watch your tone, because it's coming across as really mean.
Right. And they're like, but I didn't say this.
And
It's like, no, it's your tone.
It's interpreted as that. And
that's right.
Like, you're saying it in this way, and she's immediately reading this as aggressive, angry, blah, blah, blah. And now she's getting aggressive and watches. Now I'm trying to de-escalate. And, it's like teaching them those skills of saying like, okay, how can we say these things in a different way? Or how can we treat people in a nicer way to get them, not to manipulate them, but to, obviously we need something where we want something or whatever that thing might be. How can we treat people with respect so that we can get respect back? And those are very difficult, complex skills. And it's not necessarily something we want to just throw our children into the Lord of the Flies and hope everybody, rely on a teacher who's overwhelmed with 25
poor
kids.
Teachers, it's not their fault.
They can't police 25 kids.
Right. Or the kids on the bus. That poor bus driver, everyone's like, oh man, my kid's getting bullied on the bus. Bus driver's not doing anything.
Like,
the bus driver is driving the bus. They're
keeping it between the lanes.
They're there to keep the children safe and make sure that this car's not going to come out and hit somebody as they're crossing the street. And that bus driver's got a lot to do. They cannot police the kid getting picked on in the back of the bus.
Got to get them all to the school on time.
Right. I mean, there's just, it wouldn't be possible. And you're right. Throwing our kids into this situation and just expecting that they know what to do instinctively, it's a hard thing. And it's really easy for them to fall into, poor behaviors because somebody else did that and they want to be liked and they want, all that social pressure stuff. But we're there to help them navigate that. And really, the thing that we want for them is we want them to create meaningful relationships. We want them to be good, friends and good people. And we have an influence over that. And it's a real benefit to our kids. And I hope that by being so close, we help them to have, more deep and lifetime friendships instead of, kind of superficial, ones. And I would just hate it if it was our child that was bullying or excluding someone else or making fun of someone else. It's nothing you'd ever want to think your child would do, but we've seen so many times how easy it is for them to kind of just like, fall in with what the other kids are doing. And I'm thankful that we're there to correct that.
So that kind of wraps up the episode today. We're talking about the benefits of homeschooling for
There's a lot of benefits.
Our children. Yeah, hopefully we have sold you on it. And if you're already homeschooling, we double sold you on it. And if you have a chance and you know somebody who's interested and wants to kind of know, hey, what are some reasons around homeschooling, feel free to share this episode. And we're going to come out with a part 2 next week. I know this episode's going a little bit longer than we normally go for.
This was a big one though. There's so many things.
I think this is it, right? This is the homeschool pamphlet that you get at the
freedom, flexibility, social opportunities, love of learning.
We're out here on the side of the street just passing out the pamphlets.
I mean, there's so many benefits we've seen.
It's got to be said, like obviously there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of challenges, and we have nearly 400 episodes on those challenges.
Well, and we have a great episode, and you should link it in the show notes. It's called I think it's called To Homeschool or Not to Homeschool. Yes. It's all about the pros and cons of homeschooling because just because there's all these benefits doesn't mean that this life is for everyone. And there's a lot of things that are challenging and our struggles, and we don't want to act like those things don't exist because it's definitely a mixed bag. Right? It's a lot of work for us, and there's a whole bunch of things. So we do want everyone to go into it with their eyes open, but just remembering that, like, I love, as having homeschooled, for as many years as we have, I still love hearing things like this because even making these show notes, I was like, yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, yesterday was tough. Oh, but remember, we got this benefit. I really felt good even making these notes. So I hope if you're a veteran homeschool family, it makes you feel good too, and helps you through maybe days that are a little bit more challenging to remember all these benefits that you're getting, that your child's getting. And next week we'll talk about the benefits that you're getting too, just to double on all the good vibes. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!